Good evening. He was trying to fight his way back into the Australian Test team, but tonight South Australian cricketer Phil Hughes is fighting for life in an induced coma. The 25-year-old was hit in the head by a bouncer during a Sheffield Shield match in Sydney.
The centre of the Sydney cricket ground, and alarm and fear for a former teammate. Phil Hughes unconscious, Dave Warner and others in the middle distressed and desperate to try and help him. Moments before, Hughes was at the crease fighting for a test spot when he faced up to a bouncer from New South Wales paceman Sean Abbott. The helmet was no help, the ball spearing up and hitting him square on the neck. Hughes reeled away, staggering for a few moments and then collapsing. The first person to reach him was the bowler, realising the opening batsman was in real trouble. Those in the stands could see it too.
He looked dazed for a few seconds when the players started to run up, and then Phil was just out cold and he hit the ground, and that's when I think panic started to set in.
The game stopped, a full-scale emergency now in progress. An air ambulance was brought in to assist the other paramedics already at the ground. Along with a team doctor, they worked on the 25-year-old for several minutes. The players watched on in horror. So too did Phil's mum and sister who were at the game.
I know that his family was here today, and they saw it, so it's sad, but we're just hoping. I think everyone's hoping. Everyone, not just cricket fans, everyone's hoping.
Still unconscious and in a critical condition, he was then rushed to St Vincent's Hospital. Staff were waiting for him. Phil Hughes immediately underwent scans and now in a fierce fight for his life.
He's in a critical condition. He arrived in a critical condition and he remains in a critical condition. He's undergoing surgery as we speak.
The word had spread and the cricket world was now in a state of disbelief. Among the first to be by his side, his close mate and Australian captain, Michael Clarke. Back at the ground, the game was abandoned for the day, players and fans said to be in tears, while cricket officials lined up to wish him well.
He's a really popular guy, not just here in Australia but around the world. I just had a message from the New Zealand cricketers who are in the UAE sending their best concerns and best wishes.
The boy from Maxville burst onto the scene in 2009, scoring back-to-back centuries in his second test. He was dubbed the next Bradman, but his technique let him down. He's been in and out of the test team since then, and today was being looked at as a possible replacement for the injured Clarke. And while there is concern everywhere for the batsman, the bowler is certainly not being forgotten. Former Test paceman Nathan Bracken tweeted, "Thoughts are with Sean Abbott as well."
You know as much as we do. 24 hours, fingers crossed.
That's the message from his teammates. As a cricketer, Phil Hughes has always been a fighter, never giving up on his dream to wear the baggy green. Now he needs that spirit to stay alive. Damien Ryan, 9 News.
Reporter Neil Breen is at the SCG and joins us. Neil, is there an update on Phil's condition?
Yes, there is, Kate. Phil is now out of surgery, but he remains in intensive care in a critical condition. He also remains on the ventilator and a life support system. Now, it is expected that we will not know any more details about his condition for 24 to 48 hours. The doctors have told us that the surgery was to relieve pressure on his brain, and they need to see how successful that surgery was. Now, a lot of people are by his side up at the hospital after those distressing scenes we saw here at the Sydney Cricket Ground this afternoon. Now, I can also report to you the players involved in this match were so distressed. It was only on day one of the match, but it is now been abandoned and no further play will take place because the players were simply in no condition to go on after what happened with their great mate.
Rightly so. Thank you, Neil. Phil Hughes was recruited to join the Redbacks at the start of last season, moving to Adelaide from New South Wales. Sacca chief Keith Bradshaw spoke late today at Adelaide Oval, where Warren Treadwright joins us now live. Warren, this has come as a huge shock to the state's cricketing family.
Yeah, that's right, Brenton. The immense concern for Phil Hughes is being felt by all first-class cricketers here in South Australia. Many of them have played either against him or with him. Well wishes coming in from other sports codes too, including both the Adelaide and Port Adelaide football clubs. And as you mentioned, Sacca boss Keith Bradshaw made a public statement late today. Here's what he had to say.
He's presently undergoing surgery, and we won't know the results of that surgery for the next 24 to 48 hours. Obviously, from my perspective and from Sacca and from the whole cricket family, our thoughts and prayers are with Phil and with his family and friends. That is of our utmost concern at the moment, and we are obviously very, very shocked with what's occurred, and obviously very upset. We have Tim Nielsen, our General Manager High Performance, is there at the hospital at the moment. I'm aware a number of the players are turning up at the moment as well, and he does have some family around him at the moment.
Well, at this stage, it's unclear when Phil Hughes' Redbacks teammates who watched this horrible accident occur will actually return to Adelaide. Kate?
Thank you, Treaders. And players taking part in an international tour match at Glenelg Oval have left the field, having been told of Phil Hughes' fight for life. India had been playing an Australian 11 side, which included a number of his teammates. Eddie Godfrey is live at Glenelg. Eddie, emotional scenes as the news was delivered to the Australian side.
Yeah, there certainly were, Kate. The boys were pretty flat as they were told the news. Many of them know Phil Hughes. In fact, a couple of them play with him as part of the Redbacks squad. The Australian players were briefed as they came off the ground just after 4 o'clock this afternoon. Coaching staff spoke to them for about 10 minutes, updating them on Phil Hughes' condition. The boys all rallied around each other and looked pretty shocked and upset by what they were hearing, as did many others around the ground who came out here to watch. We spoke with some of the players as they headed to the club rooms. Here's what one of them had to say.
My thoughts are with him and everything, and I hope he has speedy recovery. And yeah,
a bit of a scary thing, isn't it?
Yeah, really scary. It doesn't happen that often in cricket.
Now, their opponent is the Indian side, which is out here preparing for the upcoming series against Australia. That's a series Phil Hughes was in the mix to receive a call-up for. That's obviously the last thing on anyone's mind at the moment. Everyone hoping he pulls through this horrific injury and makes a full recovery.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eddie.
Returning to our lead story tonight, the shocking injury to Redbacks batsman Phil Hughes fell by a bouncer during the Shield match at the SCG. Dan Nolan is at St Vincent's Hospital in Sydney. Now, Dan, Phil Hughes is out of surgery, but when will we know more about his condition?
Well, Warren, right now Phil Hughes is in an intensive care ward here behind me, surrounded by family and friends who are playing an agonising waiting game. He is still listed in a critical condition. He underwent that surgery this afternoon to try and relieve swelling to his brain. Now, it could be 24 to 48 hours before doctors know just how successful that surgery was, and also the full extent of his surgery. The full extent of his injury. What they need is for the swelling to go down, and everybody here right now is just waiting for some good news. It's almost impossible to fathom that this morning this adopted Adelaide boy is headed out onto a cricket pitch to try and push for a test spot, and right now he's in here fighting for his life. Warren?
Thanks, Dan. Dan Nolan there in Sydney.
An update now on Redbacks cricketer Phil Hughes, who's fighting for life in a Sydney hospital. He's now in the intensive care unit at St Vincent's Hospital, where surgeons have operated to relieve pressure on his brain. The 25-year-old was struck by a bouncer in a Shield match at the SCG, collapsing moments later. Family tonight keeping a bedside vigil. The tragic blow came just as Phil Hughes was on the brink of fighting his way back into the Australian Test side, something he moved to Adelaide in the hope of achieving.
Small in stature but destined for a big future when selected to bat for Australia, aged just 20 years and 3 months.
I've only had a couple hours sleep, to be honest. I was running around the house. I threw my phone down.
Set apart by a pair of ear studs and a pair of run-drenched seasons, Phil Hughes promised to take his explosive form with New South Wales to his first test in South Africa.
To me, I'll see that as a challenge.
A typically tenacious country lad, but not your average backyard hero.
For the other guys, because they were there to have fun, and Philip was there not to get out, so yeah, he took it seriously.
A new generation and our youngest Test player in a generation, Hughes already seemed to have what it takes.
Oh, look at that, Darryl, look at that.
With centuries in both innings of only his second Test, he became the youngest player ever to achieve the feat.
What a way to get to your first Test 100. His elation is visible for all to see.
But as sometimes happens with such precocious talent, lean times followed. Difficulties with short deliveries cost him a regular test spot. So, with his usual determination...
And that's the win for the Redbacks.
Hughes set about building a new technique in fresh surroundings, moving to Adelaide last season, getting his career back on track.
I suppose the sacrifice that I have made over the last 12 months has been quite big.
But just as a test recall seemed within reach, Phil Hughes is tonight channeling his renowned fighting qualities into a far more important battle. Tony Morabito, 9 News.